Thank you for all coming today. My name is Roy Evelyn. I'm the Rural Director for Alaskans for Begich. I'm very pleased that you were able to make it today. We have some very important points that the Mayor would like to discuss with you. Here joining us today is also Georgiana Lincoln, Senator Georgiana Lincoln, and I'm going to have her do the introductions for Mayor Begich.
Thank you, Roy. I'm going to scoot this a little closer. So, folks, can you hear me on the line?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Because what I have to say about Mark, I want everybody to be able to surely hear, and I told him not to look over my shoulders because he might want to cross through a few things that I have to say.
Nervous.
But truly, it is my honor to introduce Mark Begich as our next United States Senator from Alaska. And it is an honor, Mark. Early on when I was asked...
The conference call with Mark Begich.
We're having a little interference here, so folks, if you have a mute button, if you could do that, that would be great. Well, early on, when I was asked whether I would endorse Mark as the candidate for the U.S. Senator, I didn't hesitate. And I didn't hesitate for a number of reasons. Very top on my list was watching him over the last, during the 14 years that I was in the legislature. I saw a person who listened to rural and bush concerns, even though he didn't have to. After all, he was the mayor of Anchorage, not of rural or bush. But he listened. He understood that what is good for rural bush Alaska is also good for the rest of Alaska. And he understood that very clearly. I believe that he lives and breathes equality for all. That's the Mark Begich that I've always known. He fought for the best education that one could receive. Equal justice for all Alaskans to work in their own hometown, not import lower 48 people to take our jobs from us. He fought for families to stay together, to provide services closer to home. He fought for full funding of our power cost equalization program. And yes, he even fought for the right to live a subsistence lifestyle when it wasn't popular to do so. He sat and he truly listened to our concerns. Then he went out and he did something about it. It wasn't like so many that I saw walk through the door asking for something for their little corner of our great state, forgetting about the less fortunate, those who couldn't speak for themselves. He certainly didn't have to hire a rural coordinator in his mayoral office. It was just the right thing to do. He understands what family is, our Alaskan families, and how we must work together for generations yet to come. Yes, it wasn't at all a difficult job for me or a choice for me to endorse Mark for U.S. Senator for all of Alaska. I watched him care for his little son Jacob from birth, along with his beautiful wife Deborah. Just knowing what he wants for his young Alaskan son and for all of those in the next generation of Alaskans, that's what we all want for our children and our grandchildren. A chance to grow and become all they can be. Without a doubt, Mark will be that someone in Washington who understands the issues that we're facing in these difficult times, and he's willing to listen, work hard, and do something about it for all Alaskans. That's the Mark Begich that I saw That's the Mark Begich that I know. That's the Mark Begich that I believe is going to do wonderful things for us in Washington, D.C. as our U.S. Senator. He isn't one that's going to be gone that we never see again. He's going to have his little son Jacob know that he is an Alaskan. He's going to bring him back here so that he knows what his heritage is, just as our heritage is. And we'll never have him forget about that. He will live that. And it's an honor, Mark, to be a friend, to be a colleague, to endorse you as the next U.S. Senator for all Alaska.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me, thank you. And I appreciate that, Georgiana, and she's right. Wherever I try to go, lots of times, especially on weekends or evening events, Jacob is with me. And recently at Georgiana's house, she got a flavor of Jacob and helping and doing whatever he was doing at times. But thank you very much, because that's truly what this election is about. It's about the next generation. What do we do today to prepare our great state for the next 20, 30 years, and the kind of issues that we face. When we've done press conferences like this, the format we like to do is I give a little bit about the plan. Hopefully everyone has a copy of the plan in their hands, and then really create a discussion with you and give an opportunity for those that are here in the audience to comment on what's in there or give me thoughts that maybe are not in there. We've done this with healthcare, and education, and veterans, and each time we've done this, someone has always helped us develop the plan even further. And so I hope that you will engage in that. I want to first, and Georgiana really kind of did it and laid out on my background to a certain extent and my commitment to rural Alaska, Alaska Native communities throughout the state, and not only here as a mayor of Anchorage, but throughout the state and the work I've done over the years. And there has been times, I remember, I think it was Senate Bill 36, which was not very popular in the sense of rural communities. This would have taken away lots of money from rural community support education, and it would have benefited Anchorage. But I knew it was the wrong thing to do, because no matter where you live in Alaska, if you live in Bethel or Kwethluk or live in Juneau or you live in Fairbanks or Barrow, everyone kind of moves around at a certain point, and education needs to be equal for everyone. And I remember taking that issue on when our Anchorage legislators didn't think it was the right idea that I would oppose them on this issue. And we got the Anchorage Assembly to oppose it, because again, it was the fairness of education. No matter where you live, who you are, equality was the important part of it. Or the issue of subsistence, which Georgiana mentioned, that actually got the city assembly here to put on the ballot as an advisory vote to push the legislature to do the right thing and try to get them to do the right thing. So there were many times that I have been on the front line in regards to rural issues and Alaska Native issues. So it's not as I like to describe to, as I described to you this morning, it's not a newfound belief. It is something that is deep in our family's history, in our family's heritage, but truly is something I believe in, and that's important. And as I became mayor, one of the things that we really strived for was to make sure the relationship was a two-way street. That what's good for Anchorage, hopefully is good for rural Alaska. What's good for rural Alaska is good for Anchorage. That we have to all work together because we're all intertwined, interconnected. So it was very, very important. I'm going to mention just a couple highlights on the plan, and then really just be available to listen and hear the questions. Because I do think, as Georgiana mentioned, what I try to do is listen. Sometimes I talk a little too much, but that's the Begich trait, and you have to be subject to that to a certain level. But what I believe has made me a better mayor, a better Assembly member when I served, was listening to people's real issues and try to incorporate ideas on how to solve those challenges. Within the plan, you'll see some issues around energy, healthcare, economic opportunity, protecting subsistence rights, public safety, education, and economic development. And I'll mention a few specifics underneath each one, but not in great detail. Energy issues in rural Alaska is critical. There's a matter of fact, a conference going on down in Girdwood, I think over the next couple of days, talking about energy issues. Energy crisis we face today is nothing, it's something that occurred really over the last 30, 40 years of inaction. People were not focused on the long-term energy crisis that was coming around the horizon. Now we're facing it. It doesn't matter where you travel, within rural Alaska, the energy crisis is there. I've laid out a pretty detailed energy plan on our website that talks about how to reduce energy costs within rural Alaska, how to move to not only do we have to recognize non-renewable resources, but the renewable resources that are very plentiful, from hydro and solar and geothermal or the issues of wind energy. There is so much capacity here. But with energy, it's not only making sure we can find affordable and sustainable energy for rural Alaska, it's also making sure we provide new job opportunities in the energy business. I was in a village probably 2 months ago, and there was a wind farm there, fantastic, three windmill wind farm. 3 individuals worked in the wind farm activity and managing and maintaining it. 2 were from Georgia. 1 was from the village. And as we develop this alternative energy and this renewable energy, we should also make sure there is a job training component to it. So as we build and construct, that the maintenance of these facilities are done by the people who live in the community. It's good paying jobs, unique in the new sense of the economy. And as we move to renewable energy sources. Along with that, as I just came in the door here, I met a woman from Barrow. And she shook my hand and said, the concern she has is young people who cannot afford to live in the homes or able to get homes in her community. And then she described them and how energy inefficient. She didn't use the word energy inefficient, but when she described insulation, structure, it's clear they're energy inefficient. And so the opportunity to retrofit and create energy efficient homes that are currently there in buildings and building new ones is a huge new economy. The issue of healthcare, and this is a statistic that is the most startling statistic that I've heard, and that is we pay, in this country, we pay more per capita, double more per capita for healthcare for prisoners than we have for Indian health services. Now think about that statistic and where the priorities are, and where we really should be making sure we have investment. The Indian Healthcare Service needs additional resources, not only for the basic expansion and need that's happening in every community, but also the current facilities that are there. Every place I go in rural Alaska, I go to the senior center, the medical facility, and the school. It's always, those 3 facilities will tell you a lot about what's going on. But what's a common thread is some of these older facilities, how inefficient they are, and how they need redesign, but also the gap in some of the services. In healthcare services, I've laid out a plan of additional funding resources, along with improving health, continuing to make sure we have water and wastewater for solid treatment facilities or improvements that are necessary. The economy in rural Alaska, and this, again, highlighting just a couple things, I'm going to stop here in a second. You know, the 8A program, which has been very, very successful. It's been under attack by Congress in a variety of ways. I've seen the value of it from small ideas, small companies, especially in the village corporations, starting with new ideas and utilizing the 8A to break into the good old boy network business and just getting their opportunity, their business. And that has happened. There is no question in my mind. I've seen these companies just expand. And what does it do? It employs Alaskan community. It employs people all around this globe. And when those jobs are happening around the globe, those dividends that are paid are back into communities throughout Alaska. So supporting the 8A program is very important. Supporting, as I've gone out and seen the nonprofit corporations and the incredible economic power they have within the communities and growing, and making sure they have the resources they need and the capacity to continue to move forward. The last item I mentioned, because on the subsistence and the issues around Native rights is pretty strong with me, and I know Georgiana went through it, so I'm not going to go through that all again, but I do want to say that, and emphasize the point again, that understanding the lifestyle and the cultural differences within the villages as well as in urban areas, that is a very important piece to protect. It's not something that should be talked about lightly. Here's an example. When I went to some of the western communities, and they asked me about climate change, what I thought, and about villages that are being impacted. And the question was a very interesting question. They asked me a very simple question. They said, what do you think of the relocation plan? And I wasn't, it was a very straightforward question. I said, well, the most important thing is that we should be asking the communities what they think of the relocation plan. Because sometimes the decisions back in Washington, D.C. are not very in tune with what's going on the ground. And it is critical that we deal with rural communities in a way that we sit down and listen to what their concerns are. Because what happens in one village may be different in another village. It may be the exact same issue, but how they treat it or how the impact is being felt or how they want to deal with it. I think a lot of times Washington, D.C. comes into communities and says, we have a plan, we'll let you know, and here's the money, and here's how we want it done. The reality is each community is different. We have to recognize it. And it does take a little longer, a little more time, a little more patience. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as we recognize that we need to be listening to communities. I said that was going to be the last thing, but I'll mention one more thing, and that's just on the public safety front. This continues to be a great struggle, not only for urban areas, but rural areas, and the resources that need to be applied to it. When I think about the COPS program, community-oriented policing, which benefited Anchorage a great deal, we have now police officers working within our schools, but also the importance that it can help fund tribal officers and both safety support throughout the community, throughout rural Alaska, I think is important. This piece of legislation has had trouble in the past. It was funded under the Clinton administration very strongly, and under the Bush administration it lost its funding and continues to struggle. To me, this is the right kind of resources going right into communities where the communities decide how to impact public safety in the way they believe that it's going to be beneficial. And it may vary from community to community, but that's the kind of public safety investment that you'll see. And I'm going to be looking toward the communities all across the state to figure out what are the right ways to deal with public safety and how do we do it, because it may differ. You know, I'm a big fan of tribal courts and youth courts. I've seen the impact when you have peers judging peers. It's a system that works and gives good accountability, but also recognizes the community that they're being handled in. I said I would end there because there's a big, in-depth part of our plan here on rural Alaska. I just would summarize by saying energy is important, how we deal with that, public safety and the investment we have to make, the issues of health care and ensuring that we change that statistic that I mentioned. There's no reason why the prisoners of this country have better health care in the census expenditure per capita than Indian health services. That makes no sense at all. And then the fundamental is personal belief. That you'll always get from me a listening capacity to look at new ways, new ideas, and not afraid to take on new challenges that people put in front of us. I'm not going to wait for the poll numbers to be right or the temperature to be right, or I'm going to get in there. If you see there's a challenge that we have to address, you're going to see me right in there and help make that happen. And my staff, I'm fortunate enough to win the office of U.S. Senate. My staff will not just be out at events holding up papers and reading a letter from me. They'll actually be engaged. They'll be part of the process. Not after the fact, but during the process, so we can head off those challenges that we face. And an example of that would have been the issue of healthcare and energy. These crises should not have happened if we would have been ahead of the game and paying attention. And instead, I think the staff has to be reassigned in a different way of how the Senate uses its staff. So let me end there and just really open for comments or questions or improvements that you would suggest to the plan, because that's the idea. Plan sets the stage, but is not final in its final review that you have in front of you. So again, let me thank you and answer any questions. Yes. And we'll take a few here in the audience, then we'll go online. Sorry.
My name is Aldrich Mazzona. I'm originally from Nome, but I live in Barrow for the past 10 years. And one of my concerns is youth, and I believe that part of the reason is because they have been falling through the cracks as we go along. And we wonder why our jails are filling up. I'm in, my original trade is a heavy equipment operator, but I'm also in the behavioral health field. And that's where I see the insurance coverage and everything else concerning behavioral health, and then we read about AIG and everything like that. And then the treatment centers are being closed down, and we have no holding facilities for the youth. We have no treatment facilities for the youth. And we spend millions and millions of dollars to help our youth to send them to lower 48.
Right. You know, your point is right. As a matter of fact, almost all my career has been around young people. because, it is where we have to make the investment. And sometimes you have to look at certain generations and realize we didn't do as well as we could have. But the youth and investment, and what I have said in the healthcare plan that I've laid out, and you get that on the web, is mental health services should be equal to physical services. Meaning, you break an arm, you get incredible services for that. Mental health services, a lot less. These should be equal. Because with young people, it is a huge impact in substance abuse. We have, Alaska has, this is where we're not proud to be on the top of the list when it comes to substance abuse. And our young people, the treatment capacity should be increased, and I've made that a priority within my healthcare plan. That as we deal with affordability and access to healthcare, we also have mental health services and youth prevention services. It's always good to see what people have as their phone ring. But treatment facilities are very important. And I used to serve for many years on the Council on Prevention of Drug and Alcohol Abuse when it first started in the education program. The goal was to educate young people that there's a better way and a better life. But it's a two-parter. One, healthcare services for young people, but we also have to create opportunities and alternatives. And that means maybe in some communities it might be recreation, it also might be job opportunities and career training. Because you need to kind of give them hope that there's something out there. If there's not, then substance abuse starts to fill in. And that's very dangerous thing. So I absolutely, and I've made it a very strong position that mental health services, physical health services, all the same, equal treatment.
I think actually it should be done holistically, the whole thing, instead of just one little piece.
The Ernie Turner Center is a great example of kind of social rehab, holistic look versus a detox center that all you're doing is, for the night or 2 nights, doing detoxification and then you're back out on the street, maybe adult or youth. The reality is it's the whole person you look at. And the rural communities, as the Ernie Turner Center is a great example, have really figured that out. And I think the modeling we have to have in treatment facilities is that holistic look. You're absolutely right. Let me go over here.
Mark, I just want to say that I'm old enough to say that I think your dad would be really proud of you.
Thank you.
Because you're following in the family tradition of caring about the whole state, bringing Alaska Natives in as advisors, and really listening to what people have to say. Somewhere he's smiling.
If I can do just half as much as he did, I'd be very proud. Let me go here, and then I'll go to the phone.
I was happy to hear you mention 2 things. One was the development of local jobs.
I saw your head shaking when I said
Oh
that.
yeah, because I've been to a lot of rural villages, and and I see workers coming in for a week or months or whatever, and and the job's not going to local people. So I was very happy to hear that. And in your brochure, you talk about No Child Left Behind, getting rid of that. And I'm on faculty at UAS, so I see, of course, students from all over the state. And one of the concerns I have is that we, and this is not just for rural students, but for all students in the state, we need to really sort of even the educational playing field. There's no way a rural student who's had only 2 high school teachers, period,
Right.
can compete with an urban student who's had a specialized high school teacher for the sciences or for English or whatever. And the colleges can help out to some extent. For example, we have an Alaska Natives in the psychology program that's been very successful. But the problem still is that there needs to be some mechanism for, like I said, for kind of evening that playing field. So I'm really not a fan of No Child Left Behind, but what other mechanism would you put in place that would help kind of deal with that?
Sure, and thank you for bringing up the No Child Left Behind. I do not support that legislation because it sets a national standard for communities that are very different all across this country. Then you take Alaska by a subset; it's so different across our state. But the accountability part of it, and equalizing education, is an important aspect that has to be there. And we have to figure that out as a state and as local communities. But when I look at one of the first things I suggest in education, and maybe I'm even more biased now, I've always supported this program, more biased now, and that's early education, pre-K. That it is critical that we have universal pre-K voluntary, meaning that It doesn't matter what your income level is, you get access. Because we know, and as an educator, if young people have pre-K, and when they get to first grade, they're going to be ready. And when they get to third grade, that's an indicator where we can start seeing people are going to sort of make it or not. But if you can tell, when I go to school, almost every educator I walk into this school and say, what's the most important thing you can use right now? They say, we need equalized pre-K. Every kid needs to come to first grade or kindergarten ready. And several teachers and principals have said, we can point out who's not going to succeed because of that gap. It's such a significant gap. So what we have at this now is a system. We have Head Start, which is good, totally understand. It's for certain income levels. And then you have people who can afford it at this higher level, and then the bulk of the people in the middle don't get it. What I'm suggesting is that we have voluntary universal, meaning that everyone has access to it. That's important for rural Alaska, I believe, and urban Alaska. It's a win for everyone. The second thing on education, I'm a believer in the university system and what they're doing with giving high school students opportunity to earn college credit at an earlier age. But where I do believe we have to have push even deeper is in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because that's where kids are at the highest risk, especially 7th and 8th. But also, they're making decisions on what they want to do. Where, when I was in 7th grade, I had my first business license when I was in 7th grade, so I was already making decisions, but which is true, I did. But I think we have to figure out how do we engage those young people at that age, that special age of 7th and 8th and 6th to some extent, but 7th and 8th especially, and where they can see where they're going in the future. And we have to put some resources to that. Some of it will be training programs that just get them interested in some things. We're doing some stuff over here at Career Center with public safety. Why? Because we want young people to get into public safety. And so we're doing things. Or what we do with our fire department, the Explorer program, which gets them younger. The goal there is they may not be firefighters or paramedics, but they'll have a civic responsibility. They're connected to something that's positive, and they become better citizens. And they may not get into substance abuse or whatever. That's where we have to focus a lot of our energy, I think. I know a lot of people think, well, let's wait till they graduate. So when they graduate, it's too late, especially if they've gone down the wrong path. So that's what we need to do, but we also have to set some standards in a regional perspective and a local perspective, not from Washington, D.C. saying, here's how we have to make sure a small village has to be successful. The village with their region should help figure out what works best in the sense of the type of programming, the basic level of education we need, and how do we create those new partnerships. Let me go online if I can for a second and just see if there's some folks online that you might have some questions or comments that I can take.
Hello?
Yes, and identify.
Yeah, this is Victoria Barber from Alaska Newspapers. I was reading about the part where you said you were supporting human resources and recruitment to bring Alaska graduates back to the rural communities as teachers. I was wondering if you could explain a little more specifically what kind of incentives or recruitment you're referring to.
Right. I think one of the first things we can do, obviously, and I think Georgiana said in her comments, what we've heard a little bit here today, is how do we ensure recruitment within our local communities? But that's going to be the first opportunity to keep young people or potential teachers there in the long term. But I think there's a couple things. One, obviously, the housing issue. Every time I go to a rural community, the housing issue is a critical piece, and the cost of living is the real kicker. You can have a home there, but just be able to afford to live there. And we have to think of some opportunities using our tax incentives or tax laws to benefit individuals who want to teach in rural communities. And when I say rural communities, not just in Alaska, but across this country. We have a tough time. I can guarantee you other communities around the state, around the country have similar. So creating some opportunities for tax incentives for living expenses that are in the rural communities. I think the issue focused on energy and how we can continue to lower the cost of energy creates a cost of living that's more affordable. The other thing with young people, and that is ensuring that whatever education capacity they want to take on, not just college education, but if they want to go to internships, vocational education, career education, those programs also that we allow, and under my tax relief plan, I've laid out some tax incentives that create those types of programs along with college to be affordable or more affordable. Those are things we have to do in order to have young people have options. Right now, for example, some of the incentives that we have for going on to voc ed or career ed or apprenticeship programs are pretty minimal. So those opportunities just don't exist as they could. So I think tax incentives, housing tax incentives, ensuring that the quality of cost of living through energy costs are lowered for folks who live in rural Alaska and want to become teachers in those communities. And then the long term, and I'm not sure what the right approach here is, but I do think we should have incentive programs that allow some offsets or increased offsets to the wages that teachers are paid in rural Alaska to make it again more affordable. I think the federal government has a role here. Oh, is Mount Edgecombe online?
Oh, sorry, what?
I just checking, did I answer your question? I want to ask if there's Mount Edgecombe's high school students, I think, are online.
Yes, we are.
Do you have some questions or comments? I stumped them. Are you deciding who speaks or what question?
Okay, well, all of us here are seniors, and most of us are going to go off and go into secondary education. I know you were talking about education and stuff like that, so what kind of support are there programs that you have in mind that would help us, I guess, specifically pay for college and stuff like that?
Absolutely, and I'll speak first, just to give a credential here, that I was, for almost 7 years, the chair of the Post-Secondary Education Commission as well as the Student Loan Corporation. In fact, when I took over the Student Loan Corporation as its chair, it was literally running about $9 million in the red each year. It was $50 million in the hole. Interest rates were 9%, and they had low capacity of loaning. And as a matter of fact, I think Georgiana was in the state senate then, and it was in a crisis moment. And I came in as chair. We worked very hard, lowered interest rates. I don't know what they are today, but when I left, they were between 2 and 3%. We increased the capacity of what you could borrow. We put it on solid footing. Now it actually pays a dividend back to the state of Alaska because it profits fairly well. That was one of the first things, just in history, what was important in order to get some access. But also, when you look at the financial crisis in this country, it is going to have a negative impact on student loaning capacity. So one of the first things that we have to do is make sure the student loans that are available through the feds, as well as the Pell Grants and other types of funding mechanisms, are solid and increased based on the cost of education. They have not kept pace with the cost of education that young people are facing today. And I don't care if they're going to a career education program, apprenticeship, or a solid 4-year degree program, or even a 2-year degree program. The costs have outstripped what is available in the Pell Grants and student loan capacity. That's one of the first things. Also, for parents, I've recommended, again, increased tax incentives so more dollars can be a tax write-off for parents that dedicate money toward higher education for their kids, as well as for themselves, which is important. So that's one of the first things, or several of the things that we can do to ensure that you can afford to go to college. That's the biggest challenge. I think there are many opportunities, but the problem is affordability. And I think the federal government has an opportunity through student loans, increased capacity, making sure the financial crisis of this country does not negatively impact. The second is Pell Grants and other types of grant programs, and also incentives for parents who can receive incentives through tax benefits by additional dollars on the table for college education. So those are some very quick ideas that I hope give you a little food for thought. Let me, if I can, whoops, go ahead. Did you have additional questions? And then I'm going to go to Point Hope, I think, is online also.
I have an additional question in the same vein. So, in addition to providing rural Alaska with teachers and people that needed services, and to students that are needing to go to college, and they have these incredible student loans, how do you propose, or do you have any ideas about perhaps
forgiveness for student loans for those people that go into the underserved areas or the areas that, even in family medicine or into teaching, and you can't afford to pay back your student loan if you're not able to afford to live in rural Alaska.
No, the simple answer is yes, because when you have someone who is willing to go to underserved areas, that is a huge benefit, not only to the community it serves, but to the state and to the country. Because again, the philosophy you have to have is that people who live in certain communities today may move to another community. So you want to make sure you have enough resources available for good, solid education. So the simple answer is yes. I think when people want to serve back into underserved communities, there should be an offset to their student loans on a national level. Also, I think when you think about folks who are wanting to serve, there should also be incentives in regards to their pay. As I said earlier, that there's a certain basic pay level that will be available through their local school districts, and I think the feds have an opportunity to help assist with an incentive to offset housing costs and health or living costs within the communities. Let me, if I can, I'll go to Point Hope and see if there's any questions, folks from Point Hope. Are you online? Lily, do you have any questions?
I do have a question and just have a comment. I go in Anchorage thanks to you, and I was wondering if you have any recommendations for rural Alaska, how we can get this type of growth and people becoming investors to our communities.
Yes, Lily, I'll answer that question first, and then I think you had something following that. First off, the most important thing, and that's why when I talked about at the opening about investment into water and sewer and basic core infrastructure throughout rural Alaska. For example, I met with some folks today, and we were talking about ports and airport. Those core infrastructure investments are critical in order to create sustainability in the community. That will, by itself, help stabilize some of the economies within rural Alaska. Because if you don't have that infrastructure, then it's hard for people to look at the community as sustainable. So investment into those areas. That's one of the things I did here at Anchorage was what the investments are. The second thing is, and this is more of a state issue, but I think the U.S. Senator should be arguing for this and fighting hard for this back home. And that is revenue sharing that is a share of the oil wealth of this great state should be distributed to rural communities and any community based on, as we've done it before, because that is a share of the natural resources that go to the core values and core issues that people have within their communities. That again creates sustainability. The third thing, which relates to that issue, again, even though it's a state issue, as a U.S. Senator, you will hear me argue about this aggressively. You will probably see me down in the House and Senate at their committee meetings by phone or in person making this argument that the gas line, 25% of that revenue stream off that gas line should go to local communities all across this state. Again, that helps create a cash flow to basically take care of core services, water, sewer, power, infrastructure. That then builds the base that you can build an economy from. And the last thing is the community, and this is the question I always ask when I go out to rural communities, what do you want to be 20 and 30 years from now? Not what you want to be in the next election cycle, or not what you want to ask from someone who's running for next year, but what do you want to be 20 and 30 years from now? Some communities are having that discussion. That's important. That's what we did here in Anchorage. We saw what we wanted to be, and now we're building to that future. And we are making investments in that direction. That is, again, where I believe the U.S. Senate office, my office, would be very active. Our folks who work for me and would work for me as a U.S. Senator, they would be available to help make that happen, in order to help make that planning effort possible. Because if you don't lay that out, you don't know where you're going. We all know kind of where tomorrow is, but it's hard to figure out what the next 20 and 30 years. Anchorage has done that, and that is why the investments you see going on in Anchorage are paying off. That's the area that I would focus on a rural long-term strategy. Did you have a second comment, Lily?
Oh, yes, I was just wondering if you can put something on your website, like one-page promotional posters, and people that are supporting you.
Oh,
That way you can print it out from our computer,
that's a great idea. You betcha. We do have a press kit on there that you can pull down, but we'll make sure we can get miniature posters that you can pull off. And just to add to that, I can tell you some communities can't do that because they do not have high-speed internet, wireless or hardline. And one of my economic development plans for rural Alaska is that should be universal. It doesn't matter how small your village is or how big your city is, that you should have universal access to high-speed wireless and or hardline internet, because that is critical for long-term things. I mean, if you don't have high speed and you want to pull down a poster with color, it may take a little while, but we will make sure that's up. Thank you very much. And I'm getting a signal that we should wrap up, but let me just say, if there's any last comments online, then I'll see if there's one last comment here within the room. Any last comments from anyone online or question? Yes.
My name is Frank Berger. I get the Daily News. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today. I just wanted to ask you, I've been listening to it, and the program you've laid out here really ambitious. Give an example of a rural Alaskan community where you see a lot of examples of things going on now that you like to duplicate in other parts of the state. I take your point about every community being different, but when people look for models for something that's working, there's sometimes just kind of it's hard to apply an idea that you might put out to what's going on the ground. So are there things out there that you've seen in your travels that you want to, here's something that you can use for, something that we can spread that isn't just an idea that maybe coming from an idea that you're from the ground up, whether it's in Western Alaska, North, anywhere else.
Sure. Frank, let me give you one quick one. This is an energy idea. I was in Dillingham, and with the community of Dillingham, they are having major issues with energy costs, like anywhere else in the state. But their fishing vessels was of great concern that icing the fish is important to keep the quality up, as well as making sure the quantity and what they get for the price. But they were shortened on their icing because it costs so much to go back and forth to get the ice and to keep it cold and so forth. So the idea, working matter of fact with the university, and if you've ever been to their lab, which is probably 15 by 20 feet, maybe at most, they came up with an idea with not much money, but what they're going to do is in the next season is they're going to have an ice barge that will be actually out with the fishing vessels working off of tidal energy. Matter of fact, this teleconference phone here looks kind of like what it looks like. It's a large item, it's triangular or so forth, it's shaped, drops down into the water, it produces energy enough to create ice on the barge so the fishing vessels just come to the barge. They do not have to come in and out from long distances, and therefore save fuel, cuts the cost, keeps the fish product high in quality. That innovation comes from the people fishing, the university, and entrepreneurs. That is happening all across this state in a variety of areas, and I think that's the example. Or the one here in the urban area where we talked about earlier with the Ernie Turner Center, which is a holistic look at substance abuse. It's not an individual detox program. It is looking at the whole person, the whole family, and how to get them moving from the lifestyle they have today and moving them to a positive lifestyle, not only them as an individual, but as a larger family unit. And that's the two quick examples, and of course I cannot leave out tribal courts. That is what youth court, that is very successful here in Anchorage, is modeled after. Youth court was not a new concept out of the blue. It looked to tribal courts that really had a positive impact on young people and others within the community, and they utilized their communities in the decision of how to hold individuals accountable. Those are three quick examples. There are plenty, to say the least. Let me take one last one here in the room here, Frank.
Hello, my name is Lynette Marie
Good to see you,
Hans,
Lynette.
and I'm glad to see you, Mark. Also Georgiana and Roy. I was past president of the Anchorage United Tribes of Alaska, also past president of the Alaska Native Sisterhood Camp 87. We worked very hard on subsistence and hunting and fishing rights for not only the natives with our that reach our of southeastern, but we also worked for across the state. I organized 2 walks. One was from Anchorage, from Muldoon out to the village of Akutna, which is the closest Athabascan village to Anchorage. And we were walking back then in support of Indian country. And then one up in the village of Glen Ellen, and that one involved 7 other communities that helped come to walk with us. And at that time, when we had the youth, meet up with us, they were very, very concerned about the Indian country and what it would do if we got it. Unfortunately, we lost. But Heather Kendall Miller did a very good fight in Washington, D.C. for us, and I'd like to thank her again, and her husband, Lloyd Miller. What my comment was that I would like to see more Alaskan Native youth in Washington, D.C. and working as pages, because I know that we have the brightest kids and we have very, very good directed, their directions are very, very pure. And I think that if they could have firsthand knowledge of really what goes on, that would also help to bring them into the field, and we could also benefit from them coming back and being so interested that they would possibly go on with a future career, because I would like to see Alaska Natives more involved in the political process. And my second comment was that with the state and the feds, our tribal rights have been attacked and our tribal status, and that's a very, very deep concern, especially for the Alaska Federation of Natives convention that's coming up here in October, from the week of I believe the 19th, right? 20th,
Yeah.
until the 25th.
Yes.
October.
Yes. And disappointing today, I read in the paper that our governor is not going to be in the state for October and November, and she'll be out traveling on the campaign. So it does not sound like she'll be attending the Alaska Native, the Alaska Federation of Natives Conference. And without having any direct input, that's why it's very, very, it's very urgent, and it's very, very extreme that we as Alaska Natives stick together, and at the conference that we do employ the best that we can get out of all of our members, and not just, I would like the AFN not to close the ranks when you get up to speak at the podium, the mics in the conference, that they do not let anyone from the floor come up there. And I think that process has to stop. They only recognize the delegates from all over, and that's a very unfortunate process that happens at that convention, because there are some very, very good people that have very good ideas and comments, and they need to be heard.
Let me, I'm not sure I can manage AFN's internal organization, but I thank you for that comment. One thing, as I've been at every one of the conferences, I'll be there again this year. As I've gone, when it's gone to Fairbanks, I've gone up there, because I think it's important to be at the conference, because there's so many new ideas, especially the Youth and Elder Conference, which I think is a great component of AFN. In regards to tribal rights and the tribal issues, you'll find me a very strong supporter. Maybe it's my local government perspective. I believe you bring it down as local as you can get, that's going to have the greatest impact, and the dollars will get directed where they should be. I think that's an important thing. With young people, with serving as interns or pages, yes, that is one thing. When I came in as mayor, we started an internship program within the mayor's office. We have 10 interns within our law department. We have interns at our mechanic shop. We have interns working in other departments. Because the young people, I think as your first question was, I think a really important question, that is our young people is where we need to invest if we're serious about looking long-term with our state and the people of our state. So absolutely, and you'll be getting calls from me, Lynette, looking for suggestions. Thank you very much. Let me end there and just say that I appreciate all your time, appreciate you all coming today, and if there are suggestions you have on the rural plan, please let us know. Happy to add to it. If there's comments, please send them to us. Again, thank you very much. Thank you, George.